Oh, nice. So it has categories. Nice. Yeah. I spent hours on this. No, interesting. Always finding tidbits here and there. I gotta check it out. Let's check it out. That'll be good. All right. Well, if you are joining us online, this is our final Bible study for the year. We are going to wrap up the Gospel of Matthew tonight, and then we will take a break through the holidays. So we'll pick back up in January, like, you know, yeah, like, we'll all recover from our hangover, and then we'll come back like 2 weeks later, like January 6th-ish or whatever it is. I'll look for that Wednesday. I was reflecting on what we should study, and we'll go back to the Old Testament, and I landed on the book of Judges. And so if anyone has any, what I love about Judges is it's fairly episodic. And so if you miss like a week, you know what I mean, you can pick it up or just skip it, and you'll hear another vignette like the next week. And so it's...
You guys will love Jael and Deborah.
Oh, it's one of the best stories. It's 20-some chapters, so I think that'll take us through Lent, and then we'll think of something maybe post-Easter to take us to summer, and then we'll take a break for summer. We'll probably go back to the New Testament post-Easter, and I'm guessing we'll do a Pauline letter, I'm guessing. And then the fall, maybe a big chunky book. I don't know, we'll think about it. You all think about it. If there's something in particular that you're like, everyone's always chomping to study Revelation. Everyone, I'm just chomping at it, but I'm telling you, you're going to be disappointed. It's just, you're going to get frustrated, and it's hard, and so...
We did a 52-week session on Revelation.
Wow. Yeah, you can spend a long time.
Had tapes from David Jeremiah.
Oh, yes.
And he read, we were supposed to read in the Bible and answer stuff in the book, and then he explained what we read, and it was very, very interesting. We studied for about 10 or 12 weeks, and then we take a break.
Yeah.
And then we go back after 2 or 3 weeks, go again for 10 or 12
Yep,
weeks.
you needed those breathers. So the handouts, again, the one on the right back there is the new one. I'll talk about this in a second. And then there's a bunch of old handouts there. So if something looks interesting, you're like, I don't remember that, just take it or not. You're not going to offend me because it's going in the trash after I'm done. I was like going to throw it away. I was like, no, I'll offer it one more time.
The back page, is the back of the page is empty? I take them over scratch paper.
Yeah, some of them might be. Yeah. If they are, I'll let you know. So the handout tonight is from Raymond E. Brown. Sadly, he's deceased. He is a fantastic Catholic scholar. So he's a priest, and he wrote a number of books. This copy is from the Intro to the New Testament. It's published in the late 90s. And this is just a section on the end of Matthew. So the climax of the Gospel of Matthew, the passion, death, and resurrection. So I have 11 slides tonight. What I want to do is walk through a little bit of the Olivet Discourse, and then we'll talk a little bit about Holy Week. And I tried something here that I think will work, but I've never done it before, is that we'll walk through Holy Week, and we'll talk about the days liturgically and where they...
Make us act it up.
No, we won't do that. We'll talk about where they correlate and correspond.
Jesus, if you do.
Good. We can work it in. Where they correlate to the Gospel of Matthew readings. So hopefully that'll be helpful. And then we'll just end with some reflections on overarching questions like, what do you think Matthew wants us to get? What's the point of this book of the Bible? Things like that. It's not really a hard question. A hard question is like, what's the velocity needed to lift the Empire State Building off of the surface of the earth? That's a hard question. I can ask, what does Matthew want you to get from? That's an easy question, but it's maybe a complex answer, or I don't know, maybe it's very easy for you. Just things to reflect on. So I'm going to begin with a short prayer, and then we'll walk through a little bit of some stuff, and we'll go from there. Sound good? All right. Holy God, we are grateful for this evening. I'm grateful for the folks gathered here and online, and for the journey we've been undertaking these few weeks. We pray that your Spirit would continue to guide us and shape our conversation. So be present with us here as we encounter you this evening. We pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. I also am continuing to fight a cold like all of us. You know, 'tis the season. So if I start coughing, I'm fine.
Me too.
Yeah, right? Here we go. We are in Matthew. And I wanted to put kind of an outline to it. And I pulled this from a Tyndale commentary. I changed some of the wording because that's just how I am. I didn't like some of the wording. But this scholar, if you're watching online, I'm going to disappear, divides it into 5 different books. And those hinge on the 5 discourses that we've encountered, right? So Jesus does stuff, and then it's like, after, saying these things, he gathers the disciples, and then they do like field trips and miracles and healings, and then there's like a chunk of teaching, and then he gathers them again. So these are all, predicated on these discourses. So the preamble is chapters 1 and 2. Book 1 is on discipleship, really. There's the narrative there, chapters 3 and 4, which culminates with the Sermon on the Mount discourse. We're familiar with that. And then there's a whole entire book on apostleship. It's going to dial in on these folks leaving everything and following after Jesus. And then a discourse on the mission. We remember this. And then there's the hiding of the revelation. This is where we encounter things where like Jesus heals somebody and he goes, shh, don't tell anybody, right? And he teaches in parables, which is also like a riddle. Like, just tell us what the answer is, Jesus. What's the greatest commandment? He goes, well, there's 2. It's like, no, tell us the answer. Well, the kingdom of heaven is like this. No. So the hiding of the revelation, that's chapters 11 and 12, and that is this parabolic discourse. Remember the parable chapter, where they seem to kind of all be tucked in there together. And then book 4 is church work. Has to do with the mission of the church, and that culminates in the 18th chapter. Book 5 is about judgment, which is what we're going to encounter tonight. Feels sort of weird and strange. At least I've always felt it weird and strange. Maybe you're totally cool with apocalyptic language, but when I read it, I'm always like, what in the world is this all about? But if you understand it maybe in context of a crucified Messiah, then it begins to maybe take on a different shape. If you understand it in terms of like end times and angels coming down and fire and rapture, it takes a different shape. So however you want to look at that. Book 5 is on judgment. The narrative is chapters 19 through 22, which we read a good portion of previously. Then that culminates with the Olivet Discourse. It's called the Olivet Discourse because it takes place on the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives is where they grow olives on a mountain, and it's outside Jerusalem. So that's 2 chapters, which is pretty lengthy, right? You look at the Sermon on the Mount Discourse, a big chunk. The Olivet Discourse also, a big chunk. And then the epilogue, which is some interesting stories about the dead being risen in Jerusalem, and then the Messiah is there. He appears. They talk for a while. He goes back to Galilee. They talk again. He gives the Great Commission, and then the book is done. The book, the letter, Matthew, this 28 chapters of content is finished. And we can sit here and talk about all the scholarly, interesting things, like, is that the real ending of Matthew, or is there another ending? And Mark, right, there's a short ending and a long ending. And why would they add those things in? Was it added later? I don't care. It's just 28 chapters, and the ending is what it is. And if you want to, care, then go get a PhD in textual criticism. But that's that. Where did this come from? I must have been sitting on this. My children. Okay. So, let's hop in here a little bit. We're going to be in Matthew 23, 1 through 6. And just full disclosure, I want to walk through my slides so you can kind of see what I'm doing. And that way you're prepared for the questions you might have and kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Instead of going through chapters 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28, I've taken some chunks out of each individual chapter, attempting to get through all of it. We're going to kind of move forward in time. We're going to get to like chapter 24-ish, which is about when he gets betrayed. And then we're going to rewind the tape like a great Hollywood movie. When it's like, how did I get into this predicament? I'm glad you asked. And we'll roll it back to Palm Sunday. And I've handed out some cards. And then we will encounter Holy Week and the readings for those individual days. And what it'll walk us through. Sound good? So we're going to look at 23, 1 through 6. We're going to look at 23 a little bit later, 23, 24, 37, 39. We're going to look at chapter 24, 1 through 8, 25, 31 through 46, 26, and then we'll understand the events of the Holy Week. Okay? Sound good? Okay. So, then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, sorry, I'm going to check my audio real fast. Check 1. It's fine. Okay. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it. Isn't that interesting? Like, they sit on Moses' seat, so follow the Mosaic law. That's what he's telling them to do. But do not do as they do. Do as they teach, but not as they do. For they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on the shoulders of others, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. They love to have the place of honor at banquets and the best seats in the synagogues.
Are the phylacteries the things they wear on their head or on their arm?
Very, very good. Yes, the phylacteries are those things they wear on their head, right? Or they wear them on the arm sometimes. They're made out of leather. They would actually have bits of scripture in them. And
That's what it, they're magnified glasses.
it says what? Yep. Yep. So they would put these little, passages of scripture and they roll them on there. I'll show you a quick picture. I was going to put it up here, then I was like, no, I'm not going to. And now, of course, I'm Googling it to show you. But if you Google phylacteries, oh, come on, Siri, help me. You can see this guy right here. I know it's very tiny, but you can see him it's on his forehead. So the Hasidic Jews, the Orthodox Jews, they will wear these. And they also wear those prayer shawls, right? And the prayer shawl is a particular type but they would wear it under their garments. It'd be next to the skin, and it reminds them of God's presence. And they would wear it when they pray in particular. But the phylacteries come from the Shema in Deuteronomy 6, where it says, Hear, O God, the Lord your God is one. Thou shalt love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then it says, tell you what, let's look, as opposed to me just trying to wing it. Deuteronomy 6, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Yeah, that's the Shema, and then it says, Keep these words that I'm commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children and talk about them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down, when you rise. So all these words, all of God's law, you're supposed to teach your kids, right? That's what the Shema says. Keep them in your heart. Recite them to your children. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead. And write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
That's why they sell those little things.
That's right. So they sell the little plaques, and when you go to an observant Jew's home, it is right there on the door when you walk in, because that's keeping Torah. The same way these phylacteries are literally there. So, Jesus is pointing to these Pharisees. He's saying they make their phylacteries broad, like their law is broad, and their fringes long, so that people will see it. But you'll notice a couple things here. One is I've highlighted scribes and Pharisees just to reiterate the conflict that Jesus is coming into with these different groups. Right, there were the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the scribes, the Essenes. These were different groups. Yes, right? You can pick all these little different sects of Judaism. And again, it's important to recognize that, much like if I was to say, you ready? Don't hate me. It's like if you were to say, well, I'm an American. It's like, okay, great. What do you mean? And you say, well, I'm a Hoosier. Okay, well, that's different than someone from a Buckeye or a Californian or a Floridian or a New Yorker or East Coast or West Coast or Gulf Coast or a liberal or a Democrat or, a Republican or a libertarian. It's not really fair to say, I'm an American, and to be like, oh, that really clears it up. It's like if they say, oh, I'm Jewish, it doesn't really clear it up. Are you a Sadducee? Are you a Pharisee? Are you a scribe? Are you an Essene? Are you a zealot? Or do you think the Maccabees were right? Are you in with Rome? What kind of Jew are you? And so the scribes and the Pharisees are some of the people that Jesus comes into conflict with. And I love this, and I didn't highlight it here because I want to just talk about it. It says, I'm going to read it again. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it, but do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah, I get paid, but you don't.
Okay, well, come on, what else? Think on the mouth of Jesus. Does this sound echoey or familiar to anyone? Follow me, all ye who are heavy laden, for I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Right? But he's saying to the Pharisees, their burden is heavy. Why is their burden heavy? 613 or whatever? Right? You're right. They have all these tasks that you must do.
But doesn't it say they tie up the heavy burdens and they lay them on the shoulders of others? So it doesn't sound like they're bearing the burden.
Okay. I think you're onto something here. It's not stated explicitly what he's talking about, right? This is an allusion to basically their practice.
Here's what they're saying, that you should do all these things, and they're big burdens, but then they expect it of others.
But not themselves, maybe. Right. Yeah, Jesus' yoke, right, his burden is easy and light. And here it's being contrasted to the way of the scribes and Pharisees. Which I don't, usually how this is characterized is that they're very legalistic.
Right. They have all these rules.
Yes. Yeah, and I think if we're okay, let's just have to use a reflect on this. I think if we're not careful, then we just say, well, that means Jesus is no rules. It's free love. It's all these things, and it's like, no, that's not what he's saying. Like he's telling them to even keep the law of Moses, right? But he's saying that such a law should free you from legalistic concern, that maybe God's grace and love wins in the end, that the law will not make you righteous with God. Just something to reflect on. Okay, we're going to keep pushing on here. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Wow, how to win friends and influence people. All right? I love this. For you tithe mint, dill, and cumin. You go into the spice rack and you tithe 10%, which Paul will say he does. So this is a part of the legal code that you would tithe 10%. Okay, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. I mean, we've all got the little colander in our kitchen. It's interesting. What I personally loved about this passage, I thought it captured some of Jesus' criticism very well, is the idea of the letter of the law versus the intent of the law. But what I appreciated about the translators was talking about the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. This is like a judge who becomes so concerned about speeding on the way to the hospital, Like, well, you sped. I know your son was dying, but 20 years in prison, you know? Yeah, Jesus would say, no, you've neglected the weightier matter, which is justice, mercy, and faith. Why does the speed limit exist in the first place? To protect others, you know? And so you can understand the challenges here in weighing the letter of the law versus the intent of the law.
I think they do. I mean, with control of the people, they had to say, and so, you know, the people, they said, they gotta do this, they kind of missed the big picture. They were so busy having people do all the things they were supposed to do, the law, and say, you can't do this, can't do all this. It didn't get them to the right place. But it kept them in control, which is what they wanted. They wanted
Sure.
control.
They have good jobs, right?
What does it sound like? People controlling me.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's always been that way, right? And always will be. Yeah, it's just, it's a human problem. Okay, then Jesus uses a wonderful metaphor here about the hen and Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. So this is very apocalyptic language, but you can hear it couched in the terms of Jesus being, I don't want to say frustrated. That's not the right word. Bemoaning. What is he doing? Lamenting. He's lamenting Jerusalem's rejection of him. But, all right, all the prophets, that happens. They are all rejected. And so Jesus is following in the tradition of the prophets as well. You know, you might think it's cool to be a prophet. No, thank you. Do not want that job.
Does not usually work out well.
It does not. Normally they die. Yeah, Israel stones their prophets. Okay. A fascinating story. Okay, here we go. This is in Matthew 24, 1 through 8. As Jesus came out of the temple and was going away, his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. Then he asked them, you see all these, do you not? Truly I tell you, not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down. When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, there's the location again, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Tell us to do the interpretation of the book of Revelation, Jesus. Right? Jesus answered them, beware that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I'm the Messiah, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All this is but the beginning of the birth pangs. So just something to reflect on, right? Is Jesus talking about some far-off event in 2025 where people will predict the end times? Or is he talking about like the stuff that's happening right there and now? And the early church needs to be aware of the coming persecution and that he's going to die, he's going to be risen again, and is going to turn the world upside down, and it's not going to be pleasant for all the Christians. Just
I think the temple tearing down is him.
yes, there are lots of people that would interpret it that way. That when he's talking about the temple, he's talking about himself. I think it's also very fair to say that he's talking about the actual temple. And of course, history will prove him right? It's destroyed. Some people will say, here's evidence that Matthew is writing after the destruction of the temple, because how could Matthew know? And then people will say, well, Matthew knows because he's inspired by God. You see how these arguments are just cyclical? They just beg the question of each other. And so it's like, we don't really know the answer to any of those questions, and to suppose them is to suppose the answer. Okay, this is very tiny. I'm going to step back, but I wanted to get all of it in here. So this is Matthew 25, 31 to 46. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you and from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. This should sound familiar, right? I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. Then the righteous shall answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me. Then he will say to those at his left hand, you who are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick, and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they will all answer, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not take care of you? Then he will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So you can see how you can read this as an ethical teaching on do unto others. And you can see how you can read this as a apocalyptic judgment
Revelation.
on the saved and the damned. You know,
And I thought the great goat was the greatest of all time.
right? Yeah. You know, that's fun. Yeah, such is the problem with apocalyptic language, right? Revelation and apocalypse, it means like unveiling. And so like the image is somewhat, the message is somewhat hidden or construed. So, I don't know. You know, you read this thing about the whole entire where to go, about the devil. There it is. The eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. And people will write books. They will write books about that single line. And you're like, if you take it in context, I don't think it's really talking about Lucifer. You know, my opinion. But it's there for what it's worth. Okay. Good. Here we go. Matthew 26, 1 through 5. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, all right, so the Olivet Discourse, he does the whole thing, multiple chapters, he talks for a while. It's very apocalyptic. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, you know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. Okay, Jesus has already predicted his death a number of times. So he suspects it, he knows it, he's done things that he thinks might upset the people, right? So like he clears the temple, and they are not happy with him. They say as much in the following verse. So then the chief priests and the elders and the people gathered in the courtyard of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and they conspired to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said, probably shouldn't do this during the festival, or there may be a riot among the people. Now, Passover, right, is the time they remember when they were delivered out of Egypt. So it's ripe for sort of all sorts of political commentary and about being delivered from a king, being delivered from an oppressor, a bad person. Pharaoh's not a good guy. In the same way they think the Romans are probably not good people. And the Jewish folk, I mean that broadly, see previous conversation, the Jewish folk did not take kindly to being oppressed, and they frequently tried to throw off the yoke of the oppressor, and sometimes succeeded. Okay, I was going to say something more about this. So because Passover is mentioned here, right, that'll set up the framework for the back half of Matthew, the last 2 chapters. And that'll help us understand the events of Holy Week. Okay, so I got one more slide. Boom, look at this. This is beautiful. It's lovely. I worked very hard on this. Okay, so this is the last slide, and then we will reflect a little bit on this. We got plenty of time here. So when we celebrate Holy Week, it doesn't begin with the Olivet Discourse, right? All that takes place actually within Holy Week. It takes, because the Olivet Discourse happens this way. Jesus does the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, right? He gets the disciples to go get the colt, the donkey, and they go in, and the palm branches, and the kids, and the organ are playing, right? They all go in, right? And it's Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. And then they do the thing, and then he goes and he clears the temple right after he proceeds in, and then he leaves town. He heals a bunch of folks. He's in the temple, and then he goes, "We're going to go to the Mount of Olives." Yep, Bethpage, or they go outside of town. So there's Palm Sunday. There's the temple clearing and the fig tree. There's a fascinating story where Jesus there's a tree that's not bearing fruit. It's a fig tree. He curses it. It withers up. Oh gosh, what does it mean? There's books. There's books written about it, right? And then later the disciples are even like, oh, they remember the curse of the fig tree. We'll read about it. Okay, don't ask me. And then there's Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, which is teaching in the temple, and then Judas will conspire, right? So we're going to skip this one because this is the Olivet Discourse that all happens there. And then there's Spy Wednesday. Isn't that a fun name? You know, I kind of forgotten about Spy Wednesday. I was like, that's awesome. All right, so this is when Judas will betray Jesus. I'm fine. Okay, and then there's Maundy, Thursday. Maundy, right, comes from the Latin for mandate. And so when Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you, you shall love one another, right? That's where we get the word Maundy from. So it means like mandate Thursday. Sometimes it's called Holy Thursday, but that's not, we already got some other holy names. So that's the Last Supper, and we'll discover that a little bit as well. And then there's Good Friday, which is the crucifixion. Yeah, and then there's Holy Saturday. That's the day that is silent, right? Christ is in the tomb. We're going to read some of this again. It was really good to sit with some of this back half that we really don't get into a whole lot in church world. We're very good about Maundy, Thursday, especially here, right? We do Maundy, Thursday, check. We do Good Friday. We skip Holy Saturday because we're not Catholic. And then, and then we go to Easter, and we're good. And then, like, the back half, this whole entire, like, Christ in the tomb and with the resurrection we get, but the back half of Matthew, we sometimes get with the Great Commission. There's a couple other pieces in there. We'll do our best. Okay, so we'll do some popcorn reading, like we're back in 10th grade English class. Some of you have some 3x5 cards I handed out. We're going to go in order. So whoever has Matthew 21, 8 through 11, just a small little Bible nerd thing if you're interested. The correct abbreviation for Matthew is not uniform. It can be MT or MTT, and I chose to do this because I thought it looked better. Okay, so
And then it wasn't mistaken for Rome.
no, exactly. Yes, right? Or any others. So, okay, who has Matthew 21, 8 through 11? You want to read it nice and loud for us?
A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, who is this? The crowds answered, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee.
All right, hold your questions. We're going to just keep going. All right, who's got the next? So that was Palm Sunday. We did it. And now we're in Holy Week, so we go to Monday. Which is the temple clearing and the fig tree. Matthew 21, verse 12, and verses 18 to 19. Who has that? Please read it nice and loud for us.
Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. Early in the morning, as Jesus was on his way back to the city, he was hungry. Seeing a fig tree by the road, he went up to it, but found nothing on it except leaves. Then he said to it, may you never bear fruit again. Immediately the tree withered.
Thank you. All right. So then Jesus is teaching in the temple. Judas will conspire. This is Matthew 24 and 25 there. Excuse me. Yep, and then we'll go to Spy Wednesday, Matthew 26. Who has that?
I do.
All right, read it nice and loud for us.
Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests gave him 30 pieces of silver. From that time on, Judas began looking for the right time and place to betray Jesus.
Thank you. Okay, Maundy Thursday, the Last Supper. We'll read a chunk here. Who has that? Matthew 26:17, 26 through 30. Nice and loud, please.
On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" And then 26 through 30. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body." Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is the blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the wine from now on until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
All right. Okay. Jesus is out in the Mount of Olives. Some stuff happens. He's betrayed. Crucifixion is Matthew 27:45 to 58. Should we read it for us nice and loud?
From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly this man was God's son." Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and had provided for him. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Joseph and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, so that's Good Friday. We do pretty well there. And then we go to Holy Saturday, Matthew 27:59 to 66.
Jesus took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. The next day, the one after Preparation Day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first." "Take a guard," Pilate answered. "Go, make the tomb as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard.
Thank you. All right. And then our account of the resurrection from Matthew's perspective, chapter 28, 1 through 7.
The resurrection. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee.
I'm going to finish it, shall we? Here we go. So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came to him, took hold of his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." While they were going, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests everything that had happened. After the priests had assembled with the elders, they devised a plan to give a large sum of money to the soldiers, telling them, "You must say his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So they took the money and did as they were directed, and this story is still told among the Jews to this day. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." And that's the end of Matthew. Beautiful. Interesting. A lot there to chew on. All right, so we have about 20-ish minutes or so to reflect together. I have no other fancy slides. So what did you hear as we walked through this? How does Matthew's story end? What questions might you have or observations did you make? And if you don't have any, I got some. But okay, come on, let's hear them. Yeah.
Well, over the years I've read about Judas, and some feel that Judas fell a little bit because they felt that Judas thought if he turned Jesus over, he would become Messiah, and he would show himself
That's right.
as the leader. And so he thought, if I force this issue, he will say to them, I am the Messiah, I am taking over, I'm going to ride the white horse down the street and take over everything. And Judas thought, I will force this and he will do this. Well, big mistake. I know some of the disciples, that's what they wanted. They wanted him to ride in
Right.
as a conquering hero.
That's absolutely right.
Over everything.
Yeah.
So some say Judas got kind of a raw deal because he really loved Jesus, but he thought he could do this and make that happen. Well, he was wrong. And so obviously he hanged himself after this. But I don't know what people think about that, but I think it's kind of interesting that what he did, obviously was going to be done. Jesus knew that.
Yeah.
But Jesus did not want to do what he did.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it has some evidence to go along with it. I think we've talked about this before. Like, why in the world does Peter have a sword, in the garden? I mean, everyone carried a knife, a sword. Like, I don't know. It's just interesting. Jesus tells them when you go out, he sends them out 2 by 2. He tells them, take a stick, your sandals. Don't even worry about like an extra tunic. Like, rely on the hospitality. But he doesn't say, oh, and a sword, right?
On this particular day is a good idea.
Right. And in Luke, he talks about getting the sword. It's just it's interesting. And two, when Jesus in Matthew and in Mark and I think in Luke as well, Jesus says, "Who do you say that I am?" And then he says, "You're the Christ." And he says, "Don't tell anybody." And then he says, "The Son of Man must suffer and die, and you should get behind me, Satan." Right? And then Peter's like, "Yo, bro, that's not in the political playbook."
That's not how I see it.
That's right. A Messiah who dies is no Messiah. Unless you're a different type of Messiah.
Another question.
Yeah, come on.
Okay, would Jesus' body been taken down had it not been canceled? If it had been another time, would they have left him on the cross? And because most criminals were left, and they were beaten by birds.
Yeah, they were an example. It's the whole entire point of crucifixion.
And so was he taken down because of the Passover, and then they asked for his body? Pilate said yes, because it's that.
I don't know. Or, yeah, I think there are some reasons here. Joseph of Arimathea clearly has relational pull, right? Maybe he's a higher ranking official. Maybe he's maybe he's a lobbyist for the Pilate campaign.
He's a big donor.
Yeah, he could be. He clearly has property, like he's not a nobody. He's known to history. Or maybe Pilate feels guilty, right? In the Gospel of John, Pilate doesn't really seem super enthused.
He's not anxious.
He's not super stoked to kill this dude. Yeah, he seems rather reluctant. And he seems like his hands are tied politically. He's like, okay, let's see if I can barter for Barabbas. So maybe Pilate feels guilty, so he's like, yeah, take him, please. I didn't want to do this anyways.
Well, I listened to a commentary this week about crucifixion, and the fact that we use the cross as a symbol of Christianity. And the cross is a symbol of pain,
Yes,
humiliation,
yes.
degradation. Romans were not killed on crosses.
They were beheaded, right.
They were beheaded. The people that died on the cross, criminals, slaves, people of the world, this was humiliating, painful, agonizing. They left them there. Jesus did not wear a loincloth. He was absolutely
Naked.
They were all.
It's about shame.
And it was all shame and humiliation and degradation and hanging there for days, sometimes weeks, while the bodies begin to decompose. This was the most horrendous, painful, humiliating death you've ever had. And we chose that as a symbol of our Christian belief. That is so unusual.
Yeah.
The Romans did this every day. This happened all day, every day.
Yes.
And so we're using that, a symbol that Romans used for humiliation, to show
Victory,
victory.
which is wild.
And that's what he said. He goes, how in the world did that happen? How did they have to choose that? And they did.
Right. It would be like us wearing necklaces with electric chairs. Like that's what it would be, like, or lethal injection. Right, yeah, and you're like, this is what I believe in. Which, there's some sermons here, so I'm not going to start going. But,
Take notes.
like, just, I don't know how to say this. I'll just say what I'm feeling and thinking, and then I'll move on. But I think, like, our suffering and death as humans is linked to that of Christ's. Not necessarily to go out and be crucified like him, although the apostles, some of them were, but like just our mortality, like we often just jump to the whole entire resurrection bit and forget about the whole entire death part. Yeah, just a reflection.
I just want, I've never thought of it before. The word excruciating comes from crucifixion. And after somebody told me that, or I read it somewhere, I thought, my gosh, I will never, ever use that again to describe anything I've had.
Yeah, how could you? Okay, what else? Other observations, other thoughts? What else?
The whole picture has a good, happy ending.
Well,
But it has its ups and downs.
it does. It does have its ups and downs.
Please.
Yeah, there are a couple pieces that are like between the lines, right? There's 11 disciples. Well, where'd the 12th one go? Well, he's not in the picture anymore. Okay, there's sort of this, it ends with him sending them out. Like if you didn't have this, what would you do with the ending? Does that make sense? So, like, if this is where it's interesting to postulate and think about. So, like, let's rewind the tape and let's say you are, I don't know, let's say you get the letter that Matthew's circulating around the churches, right? It came to Franklin last week. It's going to Mooresville next week, and it's going to stop here this week. We're going to read the letter of Matthew, and there's no Acts, right? There's no letters from Paul. There's no book of Romans. There's no church history. We don't know, like, what do you do with it? What do you do with Matthew? What's its function or its purpose?
Inspire you to go out and preach the gospel.
Right, so he says that. He says, remember, I'm with you always. Like, go make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. I'm all over the place tonight. Sorry, you have to deal with me. I had a professor who said, did the disciples fulfill the Great Commission?
Well, obviously, because we're still talking about it, so something they did was right.
Okay. Yeah, see, we're on to all sorts of fun things tonight, right? And you'll let me somewhere else. I'll come back to that, the fact that we're talking about it. But if you think about a map of the ancient world, like how far, like again, when Alexander the Great gets to India, he like turns around. He's like, I guess there's nothing else out here. Like there's nothing, you know. And then when people got to India, they were like surprised to find like Christians, you know. So it's thought that like Thomas made it to India, and was a missionary out there. And you think about like the Gallic people, the French, like the Celts, and all these other far. What is the ancient world? You know, like you have the Mediterranean, you have Africa, but like they don't know about like South Africa, Madagascar. That's not even on the map. You know, maybe India, the subcontinent. You're not going out to like Siberia in Russia, but it kind of like there's dragons out there. You know what I mean? And then if you are like west of Portugal or Gaul and that area, like it's just water. So like you could make an argument that they did it, like they saw it within their lifetime, that they finished the Great Commission. Of course, we think of it differently. Okay, just something to think about and reflect on. Again,
We know that Paul went, that's a great
yeah,
travel.
dude's all over the place. Absolutely.
3 to 5 journeys and probably 12 to 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what I wanted to reflect on, Annie, was you had something trigger in my mind, the idea that we're here. And I'm not an apologist by any means, but you can hear the doubt towards the end of Matthew. Did you hear the idea like they say he's a deceiver and he said he was going to raise from the dead in 3 days. So they go to Pilate and they're like, look, the dude they're going to try and steal his body so that they can make it look like he was the Messiah. So you got to put, guards there. Okay, this is where the arguments begin to get like cyclical. Okay, so then is Matthew fabricating this conversation to prove that they didn't do that? Right, he's trying to create the narrative like, see, we put guards there, so we didn't really steal it. Well, if you stole the body, that's what you would say, So it's this weird little thing.
On the other hand, it said that the guards were afraid of the earthquake,
They are.
so maybe they did.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think the story is, I take it for what it is. But there's even the part that we read later that still to this day the Jews circulate that they stole the body. So this was something that was talked about early on in the Jesus movement. Okay, but this is where it gets interesting. Is if that's true, you know what I mean? Like if that's true, why did all the disciples
Do what they did.
did what they did? Like who would die? This is the idea in apologetics is who would die for a lie that they know. And of course, when we're little, we double down on our lies, but like this is like literally life and death. And we know from the other narratives that the disciples were spotty at best, It's interesting to think about the Gospels and how the disciples show up, and then the book of Acts and how the disciples show up. And there's a contrast in the character of the disciples. And what hinges and changes in the character is the resurrection of Jesus. It's coming face to face with something that is completely implausible and flies in the face. I've buried a bunch of people as a pastor, and ain't none of them risen from the dead. Like it doesn't happen. And so I think there's a strong argument to say something happened that has changed the face of the world, and we're still talking about it in Greenwood, Indiana. And that's crazy. It's crazy.
Why does the calendar start with Jesus' birth?
Because a crazy event happened.
Yeah, exactly.
A crazy event happened.
An event happened so spectacular that it was believed. around the world.
Yeah, it changed
The way that
everything.
they do it.
Yeah.
Well, I wish they'd written more about what happened after he was there, because that's not talked about a lot.
It's not.
Well, he was only around 40 days.
Yeah, okay. So you're right. And there's some interesting tidbits here, right? We need to compile the mosaic of the four gospels and to see that the other witnesses. Hey, doing all right? No, the AA meeting is. Thank you. Yeah, if I point to it, you'd probably get lost, so she'll walk you there. So we need to look at the mosaic of the other gospels that share about Jesus showing up post-Easter. And then Acts also fills in some of the pieces as well. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Except for there's some other really interesting things, and this goes back into apologetics. There's one more piece, so if we take the biblical witnesses for what they are, and I have another broad question about this, is there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who witnessed this resurrection. Whereas if you ask someone, and you guys have probably heard these arguments before, but they're very fun to ask. Like if you ask an atheist, like, do you believe that William Shakespeare was a real person? They're going to say, well, of course. Right? And they go, how many eyewitnesses, are there to William Shakespeare's life? And they're going to say, 10. Like that. We don't know the answer, right? It's the same with like Julius Caesar. Like, do you think Julius Caesar was a real person? And the most staunch atheists will say, well, absolutely. There's a whole month named after him. Okay. And then how many people witnessed Julius Caesar's life? When you say how many people witnessed the resurrection, and they go, oh, that's different. It's different. And you go, okay, you can make up your facts however you want to make up your facts.
That's amazing, it's so different.
It is.
They changed the world.
It is. It's fascinating. Okay, so the question I wanted to stem from that is Matthew, are you ready for me just
Yeah, we're ready.
to frustrate you? Hopefully we will learn and we will grow from this. Is Matthew historical?
Yeah, he wrote a book. I don't,
Is the Gospel of Matthew historical?
yeah.
Entirely. Okay, all right, let's play with this.
Mostly.
Mostly? Is there anyone who would say not at all?
I don't know history well enough to have an opinion.
Okay. Is it factual?
That it's backed up by other gospels. So, he is not, it's not only Matthew. We have other people writing a similar story, similar stories that he writes with the same outcome. So, is it historical? I would think the fact that several people wrote the same kind of story, that it happened, is historically accurate.
Well, are there places other than the Bible that link the things that are written in that?
So okay, I'm gonna pivot here, just to sharpen our minds. Is Homer's The Iliad historical?
You mean, did it really happen, or was it really written?
Well, it's clearly written, right? We have it. But is it historical? Kind of. Do you see the... Okay, right. We're doing good. Yes.
Now, the storyteller might want to kind of enhance the story.
That's right.
Elevate this stuff, make it even more exciting for people.
And does that make it not true? Okay.
I always wanted.
Kind of like a newscaster?
I always wanted to buy that book, The Case for Christ by Strobel.
Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to buy that for everybody in the Sunday school class, but then I lost my vision, and I hate to ask Chris to do one more thing, but I know to get it online for about $1 a book.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to get us deep into the weeds of apologetics. I'm just trying to get us to think about the function and purpose of Matthew and how it relates to us and maybe to others around us. Does that make sense?
Jesus, the fact that millions and millions of people have read this story and believe this story, and I'm one of them.
Yeah. I think there's some merit there, I get frustrated with some of my friends who are like, oh, this whole Jesus thing is just all made up. And I'm like, I think you're crazy. Okay, so they will, right? They'll say millions and millions of people believe that the earth was flat for a long time. And it clearly isn't. So, you know what I mean? Like, how much evidence do you need? Does that make sense? How much evidence do you need? And I would say it's all a matter of faith. Even the most assured thing that we think is absolute historical fact or truth is still a merit of faith. We might find out tomorrow that 2 + 2 really isn't 4. It might be 3.8. You know what I mean? And then we would change all of our math.
There was a two before.
We would change everything. You know what I mean? And we would say, oh, we were wrong. So we take, even like gravity is a theory, we take it on faith. Even our most certain things. So when I say, like, is it historical, I'm not trying to tease you or mess with you. I'm just trying to get us to think about, I say, what do you mean by historical? Like, I don't think Matthew's trying to write a biography, right? But I don't think it's detached from reality.
I don't think it's just a novel.
Right, and I don't think he goes so far as to take, creative licensing just to say, well, let's stick in a bunch of miracles while we're at it. I think these things are tied to events that happened and are true, and they changed everything. And until we encounter that reality, I don't think we will. I don't know. I think that when we encounter that reality, rather, then we encounter the story of Jesus more honestly. And so I find it helpful to take Matthew on Matthew's word and to be challenged by the gospel. The gospel, right, it means good news. So it's not a biography, it's not historical, but it's not ahistorical, and it's not detached from reality. So the genre of gospel has been debated for centuries. Like, what exactly is it? Because there are other examples in Greek literature. But there's like a Medusa character or a Minotaur. And you go, oh, that's crazy. And they go, well, we have like a Lucifer. You know what I mean? So, is it really that crazy?
It's so real that the Muslims created their religion.
Yeah, they pull from these stories too.
The Mormons,
Yes, yeah.
it's a both copycat religions.
Yeah, they are connected to these stories, absolutely.
The reality is like that. All the disciples kept seeing Jesus performing miracles. They're going, are you one?
Right.
They see it. They see it with their own eyes. But they still don't get it.
Yeah, and the gospel writers record that. They record that doubt and the uncertainty. If you were trying to write a story very compelling, you would weave in uncertainty, but then you'd prove it. And by the time, like, if you read the end of Mark, they all run away afraid. Like, that's not how you end your heroic journey. You know?
I think what has always sold Christianity is these 11 guys that doubted, followed it, saw miracles, witnessed all this. They doubted, they saw the resurrection, they came in contact with Christ with it. Those 11 guys that were total doubters, 2 or 3 weeks before, said, I don't know about this guy, and all of a sudden he shows up, they go out, they give their lives,
Literally.
and are killed in miserable, agonizing ways for a guy that never showed up after.
I know. Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Yes.
These guys are not heroes in any sense of the word until Christ appears and says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And you have got to tell people about what happened. And they do. And they all but one died miserably. And why would they do that? Money? No.
Yep. They didn't make a buck off of it.
No. Nothing made them do this but the belief that what they saw was real and true, and God was manifested in Christ. And I've always thought, why would those guys do that if they did not truly believe and were completely convinced this man was the Son of God? And we've got to tell the world about this. Knowing, and they knew they were going to die terribly. That's like the
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
This is not going to end well. This isn't going to end well. But we're going to do it anyway.
You're not really selling this religion really well. This is. I get no money. I get no extra wives. I get no house. This is bad. Jesus says I don't have a place to put my head. Okay, so we are about at time here. I'm just going to reflect on one more thing. I hope this has been helpful. I love returning to the Gospels. My goal is that maybe next year we will return to another one, and we'll probably do John, but we'll do it some other time. The thing that, for me, transformed one of my readings of Scripture, specifically the Gospels, is when I encountered the Old Testament. And then, I begin to connect so much of the Old Testament with the teachings of Jesus. And that helped me understand a lot of the depth that I was missing when I was reading the Gospels at just face value. And so that's one of the reasons why we keep waffling back and forth. And we'll go, so I believe there are things in Judges that we will say, oh, I didn't know about that, or I didn't know about this. And you'll see God's salvation movement.
You'll love that.
So it is good. Okay, any other questions, thoughts, concerns?
One thing, I don't think I mentioned this last week, but over the last couple of weeks, I came upon this man, a guy named Jay Smith. Never heard of this guy. He is a Christian apologist. He has been studying the Quran since the 80s. For 40 years, he carries the Quran around in his pocket. He has read it. It's dog-eared. He has studied the Quran. He talks about the fact that he does not necessarily believe that Muhammad ever existed.
Yeah, interesting.
Have you heard of this guy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, because I haven't heard all this, but he dates everything, and he says the disciples, Paul, lived at the time of Christ. The people that wrote about Muhammad did not write about him for 100, 200 years after he died. And all that they wrote was hearsay. People told that story verbally, and they start writing this down. What was their agenda? Why did they do that when they never knew him? No one ever met him, knew him. All they heard were stories. And it happened 100, 200, 300 years after he was on earth. And this guy says, I'm not sure he ever existed. He was potentially made up to do what they've done.
I just
And
said,
and he gets up and says that. He gets up in auditorium and says, he didn't exist. They do not like that well.
No, yeah.
But I haven't heard that whole story. I've listened to the thing was an hour and a half long. I didn't get all of it in.
I told you, it was a copycat religion.
Yeah.
They copied
Well,
Jesus.
I think that they're tied together. I'm uncomfortable saying it's fake or copycat or made up, because I think they would turn around and say the same thing about parts of our New Testament, right? They would say, "Oh, that story about Jesus is fake or made up." It's like,
Well, the difference, though,
You know.
there were people that witnessed, the disciples witnessed this. They were firsthand.
yes,
They knew him
Yes.
as a man. No one knew Muhammad. No one that wrote about him ever knew him. Lived with him, lived at times.
it's like the William Shakespeare example. It is. No, I think it is interesting. I would love to do a comparative religions with you all. I think that would be fascinating. Not on Wednesday night, though. We will reserve this for the Bible. Okay, I'm going to offer a word of prayer, and then I'll see you all when I see you. So, Holy God, we are grateful for this time together. Pray that you bring us rest, that we might tend to our tasks with a renewed passion. Continue to cause us to reflect and pray and grow on these things, that we would be people who resemble more your kingdom. We pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. Thanks, friends. Good to see y'all.